There's death, there's destruction.
Global news impacts us.
We have to change the way we live. This is why we need independent media.
All right, cheers and salutations. We have ourselves a very special show. Start your morning right and righteously angry here with Hardlens Media, Chicago's fastest growing independent media network. And joining us live in the morning, taking time out of his day, doing an outstanding national tour. He was recently here in Chicago. Give it up for Chicago's very own, the one and only Jimmy Dore. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining Hardlens Media this early in the morning.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Kit.
So, you know, what we usually have done back in the day, especially when you used to tour in Chicago before, I guess, all the lockdowns and all this other crazy BS is, you know, we would get your opinion and thought about, you know, what's it like hitting the road again and obviously doing all these shows. And recently there's been all this talk and hype amongst corporate media about, oh, no, here comes another wave of lockdowns. And you've been recently doing an outstanding show, especially in regards to COVID lies are funny. With the interactions that you're doing with people in red states and blue states, which again I think is a stupid term, again, red state, blue states, but you're running into different people. What's the overall reaction to individuals who see your show? And obviously I think every one of us are coming together and realizing that we were just played and bamboozled throughout all of 2020, and it seems like they're trying to hype up all this BS again of being afraid. What are your thoughts?
Well, certainly the people I see at my show feel that way, that they realize they've been lied to on an unbelievable scale. But most people still won't accept that they were lied to about COVID. Most people I know, I mean, the people I see on social media, and if you point out to them that they've been lied to, they just memory hole it. It's cognitive dissonance. It's like when I grew up in the 80s and 90s, there was used to be the people who were anti-science were the extreme right-wing Christians who didn't accept evolution. Remember that? And they didn't want it taught in schools and stuff like that. And we were always like, wow, how could they be so crazy like that? Well, the Democratic Party is even more anti-science than that right now. I mean, they push masking, right? And masking of children. All these things are harmful. Masking is not, there's never been science that shows that masking stops an airborne virus from spreading in population. It doesn't. There's never been science that showed that. In fact, I've showed it on my show a million times with Dr. Fauci for years said don't mask and don't do that. And that because it has unintended consequences. And then he said, and then he switched and said, no, everybody should wear a mask. And they said, well, why did you say the opposite? And he said, well, I was lying. That's what he said. He said, I was lying before. Well, if you're a public health official and you lie about something serious, you're supposed to resign when you get caught lying, or if you admit it. But he didn't. And why? Because he was lying to make people wear masks. And why would he? Well, I did a show with Dr. Drew, and Dr. Drew used to work with Dr. Fauci during the AIDS crisis. And he told me that Dr. Fauci's number one way to get people to comply is to scare them. He said, fear, 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 use fear. And so that's what that was. Masks don't do anything. In fact, they have deleterious effects. You get sicker if you wear them, and all the problems with kids, and so he just lied about it, and people don't care that they lied about it. And then he lied about natural immunity. Then he lied about herd immunity. These are things that they admitted. they lied about it. And people don't even want to hear that. And then, of course, they lied about this vaccine and the transmission. They said that the vaccine would stop transmission, and that if you got the vaccine, you wouldn't have to wear a mask, and you wouldn't have to. You wouldn't be worried about spreading it to grandma or anybody else. That was said by Fauci. That was said by the President of the United States. That was said by Rachel Maddow and everybody in between. And when I show people that video of them saying that, usually it's preceded by them saying nobody ever said the vaccine was going to stop the transmission, Jimmy. They just said it was going to keep you from getting seriously ill or hospitalized. And then I show them this video, a 5-minute video of everybody from like I said, Rachel Maddow to the president to Fauci saying the exact thing they said no one said. And I'll show them that video. And then they go, yeah, they just got it wrong. I'm like, no, no, you said no one said that. You said you were convinced that nobody ever said the vaccine would stop transmission. In fact, they all said it. And now I
Yeah.
show you that they all said it, and it doesn't bother you. Just completely cognitive dissonant it. But however you use that phrase, they just employ cognitive dissonance, and they just pretend like they're all good people, and they wouldn't ever lie to them. Because I guess if they actually did admit to themselves that they were lied to, then they would have to start looking into stuff and doing their own research, and then they would realize that they jeopardize their own life and the lives of their children
Mhm.
because they listen to criminals like Dr. Fauci. And I don't know if this is going out on YouTube, but you better be careful.
Yeah, well, I mean, we are live on YouTube, Rockfin, and Rumble. But you know, I mean, at this point, I mean, look, people need to start having these conversations. Just one real quick nitpick here. There is something a little bit wrong with your sound. You are kind of coming in just a tiny bit choppy, but if we can fix that just a little bit. But
Oh, you know what? Let me take off my earbuds and see if that helps. Hold on a second.
all good, Jimmy. So again, everyone who's joining us, if you're not aware of it, Jimmy Dore is on tour right now. So that's why he's got the outstanding good friend of the show, Pasta, filling in here and there. Pasta's been doing some great work. I don't agree with him and his stance on pizza because New York style is nothing compared to Chicago style, but that's a story for another day.
Hey, I got to tell you, I understand. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, good. So, when I was in Chicago last time, I had heard all about this Pequod's Pizza,
Oh God, why'd you do
and,
that?
and so I ordered a couple of Pequod's pizzas, and I hate to inform people in Chicago, but that's not pizza. That's focaccia with some sauce on top of it. That's not pizza. So I know people think it's a great pizza. It might be great focaccia, but it's not great pizza. That's not pizza. Pizza is Pizzeria Uno, Giordano's, Lou Malnati's. That's
Exactly.
pizza.
Well,
Okay, I just wanted to clear that up. Sorry.
well, no, it's perfectly fine. I mean, let's face it. I mean, what people don't know is that there's like 4 different styles of Chicago style pizza, not just deep dish. But anyways, I'll save my beef with pasta for another day.
Okay.
But you know, when we talk about again failures of institutions, failures of leadership, I mean, there's been recently again this ongoing crisis and the fallout what happened in Maui. And when we see Biden acting senile and comparing his loss or his quote unquote loss of what happened to his house in comparison to people of Maui who lost everything. One thing I think we've all come to terms with, something that you've called out, is that we're ruled by sociopaths. We're ruled over by people who have no idea what it's like to be an average working class citizen in the United States, where neoliberalism has gone out of control. You know, you kind of gave this warning at way back in 2016 when, you know, there was still this idea of maybe Bernie Sanders could still do something and maybe there could be a revolution within the DNC or something like that. But did you ever think it would become this bad and this blatant out in the open, especially what happened in Maui?
No, I didn't think. I didn't think Bernie would become quite the evil genius that he turned out to be. And I'm not really using. I'm not using that term lightly, by the way, because what he did is evil. And he lied to people repeatedly. He lied to them for years, lied to them to their face, and now those same people, when they confront him about his being a war pig and a liar, he says that they're being paid by somebody to protest them. That's what he says. Peace activists are corrupted. That's what he says. So I could never have predicted that. And so that's what's happened to the left, is that they don't have a leader. And so guys like Bernie Sanders just he took all that progressive energy, Remember, he used to start his speeches with, "Hey, it sounds like you're ready for a revolution."
I remember it, especially in Chicago in 2020 or early 2019 at Navy Pier. That was like 13,000 people filled up this one area in Navy Pier when he was running for his second or it's his second attempt for president, or to try and get the nomination from the Democratic Party. I
But I
remember
don't
that.
think the second time he ran, I don't think he said that. The first time he ran, he started every speech with "Sounds like you're ready for a revolution." The second time, he didn't say that anymore, did he? He didn't say that. Every time I saw him give a speech, he didn't say that. I can't find, but maybe he said it in Chicago. I don't know. But the thing is, he he already endorsed Joe Biden, 18 months ahead of the election. And that's a guy who's promised to veto Bernie's signature piece of legislation, which would be Medicare for all. So it just goes to show you that Bernie's a phony and a fraud, which makes him worse to me than Mitch McConnell. I know who Mitch McConnell is. I know who Manchin is. I thought I knew who Bernie Sanders is, and the wolf in sheep's clothing is much more dangerous than the wolf in wolf's clothing. And that's what Bernie Sanders is. That's what Barack Obama was. That's what Bill Clinton was. That's what Al Gore was. That's what Hillary Clinton is. And that's what Joe Biden is. Joe Biden, way worse of a president than any president, I think, in my lifetime. He's certainly worse than Trump. Trump wouldn't do the Ukraine war, which is why they impeached him.
Well, and the thing is, as well, when we look at Biden and how he handles the crisis, I mean, he has yet to visit the people of East Palestine, Ohio, and there's around 4,000 people who are wondering what's going to happen to their community. I mean, the entire area is still contaminated. The water's not safe to drink. And as in for Maui, Biden flies in there, tells people, hey, I almost had my house catch on fire, but it's okay. Whereas everyone else, I mean, there's still 850 unaccountable people there. And most of those individuals that are lost are still children who've been burnt to a cinder. And this president has the audacity to tie $12 billion in relief aid to the Ukrainian $24 billion in military aid. And even I have to wonder how much lower does the Democratic Party have to get? I mean, the people of Maui who are American citizens are still left holding the bag. And there's been recent reports of individuals with FEMA actually at some 5-star hotels living it up. I mean, maybe they're possibly living it up. I mean, there's been reports of them, some individuals going to the golf courses, and that's neither here nor there. But it's just we're always last in line. I never thought we'd get to this point to where we are always last in line. And what I have to ask you, Jimmy, is when you talk to people who are in different parts of the country, especially for your comedy show, does anyone just come up to you and say, well, how low does it have to get for people to really demand some kind of change? Because we have to have some kind of pushback. The only thing we're getting right now is AOC fighting for sunscreen, and that's it.
No, I mean, that's the question I ask. I ask them, how much more are people going to take? When are people going to get in the streets? How can people keep voting for this? Joe Biden is more than a sociopath. He's a demented sociopath who's an enemy of the people. And and if you saw the CNN reports about Joe Biden's visit to Maui, they made it sound like he did everything right and he's the greatest guy in the world. And I tweeted this out yesterday. And the reason why that PR commercial ran on CNN for Joe Biden is because the same people who own CNN are the same people who own Joe Biden and the Democrats and the Republicans. So people were awake to this in 2016 with Bernie Sanders' campaign. And now it seems like it's all gone away because they've convinced people that somehow Trump is a 30-foot tall Hitler who's going to institute fascism. Well, the exact opposite happened. Joe Biden is actually committing fascism and starting 2 nuclear wars at once. So this idea of people throwing that term fascism around, it's very invoked. So that's what they have to do now. So they have to convince Democrats, people to vote for Joe Biden, that they're fighting fascism, meaning they're fighting Hitler. And it turns out Joe Biden's actually a way bigger fascist than Trump ever was, and still is. If you know what fascism is when the government comes together with the corporation to screw the citizen. And that's what Joe Biden's done his entire career. And he just did it with the railroad strike. I mean, he literally crushed a union and a strike. And so that's called, and he did it for who? He didn't do it because it would help the country. He did it because it would help the oligarchs who run the railroad. So I was asked this yesterday. I was on another show here, Ryan Long show here, and I'm in Manhattan because we're playing her tomorrow night. And
great stuff.
I asked him, when are people going to get pissed off about being lied to? When are people going to actually step up? And he's like, well, what do you think we should do? And I said, well, we need to get in the streets like the truckers did in Canada, and we have to shut capitalism down until we get what we want. And he was like, well, what do we want? I'm like, well, the first thing I would say, because he was like, how do you fix homelessness? I'm like, well, you give everybody health care. That's the first thing you do. And then people with mental illness, they don't have to sit out in the street. You take them and get them, you get them some mental health, and you get them some physical health. You get them some every. And then he said, yeah, but you can't get that passed. And I'm like, yeah, that's correct. So the first thing you have to do is you get corporate money out of politics. And how do you do that? You narrow the election season to 6 weeks. Right now, they're running for president already. And they had they had their first debate last night for F's sake. So what you have to do is you narrow the campaign season to 6 weeks, and you have public financing of campaigns, and that's that. And so there's no more corporate influence in our government. Now they're going to fight that tooth and nail. And they're going to, anybody who actually tries to do that, they will call you a Nazi and they will call you a white supremacist, just like they did the truckers in Canada. By the way, I have to remind people that the truckers in Canada, they were vaccinated at a higher rate than the general population. They weren't protesting medicine. They were protesting bullshit authoritarianism, fascism, and they were right. And Justin Trudeau is a fascist, just like Joe Biden is a fascist. So I don't like using that word because the Democrats throw it at anybody who they don't like. So it's just like now, it's just like white supremacist or misogynist, like they did it to Bernie, right? Bernie's, and that's the thing I have to remind people: what they're doing to the former President Trump right now is what they claimed Donald Trump was doing to his political opponents. That's what Cornel West said. That's why Donald Trump is a fascist and Biden isn't, because Donald Trump tries to criminalize his political opponents, and that's what fascist dictators do. Well, that's exactly what the Democrats and Joe Biden did to Donald Trump. They did the exact thing, it's so the people who run the country. Remember, they don't care about the country. It's just like that scene from Network where Ned Beatty said there are no countries, there are only companies.
Oh, I remember that scene. Yeah, I remember that scene.
And they're only companies and the international shifting of the monetary flow. And he upset it and he had to atone.
Yes.
Those people would be perfectly okay if there was an actual civil war in this country, because they would keep making more money. And that's what this Ukraine war is about. That's what the Syrian war is about. That's what the China saber rattling is about. That's what it's always about military industrial complex. And if the United States is in a war, it's because we're there at the behest of a corporation to steal natural resources, or in the case of Ukraine, so we could sell more natural resources to Western Europe in the liquefied natural gas, which is why we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. So this is all about an economic war on Russia. They're doing it right on the open, and they're criminalizing a guy who didn't want to do this war. That's Donald Trump. And so we are now a banana republic, but it's the exact opposite of what people think. It's not Donald Trump. It is Joe Biden and the establishment of the Republican Party and the establishment of the Democratic Party. And I'm no fan of Donald Trump. I opposed most of his policies. But people don't realize, and I have to explain this to them, Bernie Sanders knows that if he had the balls to actually grab power and stand up to Joe Biden and the machine, that he would, what is being done to Donald Trump would be done to him, because they already did it to him. They already said that his followers were violent, misogynists, racists. And he let him do it. He didn't push back on that.
I remember Philly.
They already said that Russia was supporting his campaign, and he didn't push back against that. He said it was wrong that Putin's doing that, and he should stay out of our elections. So he knows that they would throw him in jail if he actually tried to get power, and so he doesn't. And he doesn't even he won't even stand up for anything. He's doing nothing. Remember how important people thought it was that Bernie Sanders was going to be chairman of the banking committee?
Well, the thing is, what I find interesting about Bernie Sanders, because I remember 2016 in Philly when I first got started, before Hard Lens Media got started, Daniel and I were interviewing delegates who were there on the ground. And they were all saying the same thing. And I'm pretty sure you heard the same stories too, on how many of them were being stalked, harassed, assaulted. And I got to be careful with my words here on YouTube, because again, some of the women delegates were saying that, hey, I was assaulted. And again, it's pretty downright deplorable of the actions of the Democratic Party and how Bernie Sanders let people walk all over his supporters. But what I find interesting is the absolute shift that has happened between the left and the right. And I've had a few conversations with some Trump supporters, and what I find interesting is that they've asked me this question. That is, whatever happened to that anti-war movement thing? Don't you find this thing in Ukraine to be absolute BS? And I've been noticing that even though it might be a little bit different than, let's say, how leftists perceive being anti-war, there is this huge pushback against all this monetary aid to Ukraine from Trump supporters, saying like this war in Ukraine is absolute BS. I never thought I'd ever see the day where like the anti-war movement would be more or less being led by another group of a different part of the political spectrum altogether. And I just want to kind of get your thoughts on that, because I know you've brought it up on your show. A lot of us have brought up on our different shows where there's this talk of what happened to the anti-war left. And I'm seeing Trump supporters ask me that question here, and they're like, hey, whatever happened to that anti-war movement? I thought you guys would be out there in the streets. Don't you think this thing in Ukraine is absolute BS? And I'm like, yeah, it is. But again, I could talk about Chicago protests, but I don't want to take up too much people's time. I just want to kind of get your thoughts on that, because I find it's absolutely fascinating that we've gotten to this point to where if you're anti-war, you're a racist or a misogynist or a Nazi. And I never thought we'd ever get to that point.
Well, the anti-war left got infiltrated. Bernie Sanders is an infiltrator. Bernie Sanders was never an anti-war. He was never with the people. Bernie Sanders was always a willing tool of the war, and that's why he's a war pig, and that's why he's a liar and a fraud and the worst of the worst. And so that's what happened to the left. They infiltrated us, right? Mm-hmm. Code Pink has been infiltrated, right? Now, Code Pink is supposed to be this a bunch of women who are anti-war. Turns out they're not. Turns out that it's just a social club for them, and they cosplay and they use the idea of being anti-war until they actually have to be anti-war, and then they don't go to anti-war rallies or support them because of their LGBTQ agenda, which has nothing to do with being anti-war. So they're an LGBTQ organization, which, as we all know now, comes from BlackRock and the top, right? That's all this trans stuff and all the stuff we're talking about. This didn't come from the ground roots up. This came from the top down to divide us. And that's why we're talking about bathrooms and gender surgery and men invading women's spaces. And the reason why we're talking about this is because the establishment knows that they don't want us to talk about class and economic issues. And so that's why the Democrats, all they have to talk about is white supremacy and LGBTQ. And that's all that they're doing, is to using that to distract us from the actual economic issues. And it's working. It's working 100%. And they just call you a phobe or a white supremacist. And it's worse than I'd ever seen. So that's what happened. I mean, the Code Pink has obviously been infiltrated. And now they're a worthless organization, as far as I can tell, because all you have to do is say that there's a speaker at an anti-war rally who's not on board with the LGBTQ agenda, and they'll denounce it and they won't show up. So, you know, what's funny is, like, you know, a lot of if you go to Latin and South America, a lot of the left, right, that is associated with the workers, they're not on board with the LGBTQ agenda. And nobody seems to call them white supremacists, right? Nobody, and that's just ignored by the Democratic Party. And I don't call the Democratic Party the left anymore. They're not left. Again, they're a right-wing party, just like AOC said 5 years ago. They're a right-wing party, and we can't even get a vote on Medicare for all on the floor. That's what AOC used to say. So the anti-war left has been infiltrated by AOC is an infiltrator. Bernie Sanders is an infiltrator. Everybody in the squad is an infiltrator. They're all frauds and liars. And they're there to make sure that a revolution doesn't happen. They're there to make sure that workers don't rise up. That's the exact truth. And because they've done absolutely, they voted for the CARES Act, which was the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history. And Bernie Sanders lied about it. He lied about it. He lied, and he said that he was the one who got the unemployment insurance in that bill. And of course he didn't. That was a big lie. And by the way, the unemployment insurance that he bragged about getting in the CARES Act, that he didn't get in, AOC referred to that as crumbs. And because they were crumbs. They gave
Mhm.
$5 trillion to the richest 1,000 people in America, and they gave crumbs to everybody else. And Bernie Sanders pretended like it was some kind of victory, and he never apologized for it. So that's what happened. Guys like Bernie Sanders and AOC are worse than Joe Manchin and Mitch McConnell, because you can see Joe Manchin and Mitch McConnell coming. You can't see Bernie Sanders and AOC coming. In fact, there's still most of the people who vote Democrat think that they're real. And of course, they're not. They're infiltrators and frauds.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of glad you brought up Code Pink, because I remember just a few months ago, I did a segment covering how INN, Indie News Network, they went to cover a squad victory fund where you had to pay money to see the squad members. And Medea Benjamin was there. And I think one of the reporters, Colin Radix Carter, yeah, it was Colin, who asked the squad, like, hey, how come we're not doing anything about student debt? How come how come we're still doing all this unending war funding? And Medea Benjamin was absolutely silent. And apparently that victory fund, the most expensive ticket cost like $500. Least expensive ticket, I think, cost like $50. And the Democrats who are supposed to fight for us are still asking us for money when they've never delivered a goddamn thing. I have to just say, when the talk of a need for a third party or an independent movement needs to happen, there's always this quick rush of, we could still be pragmatic and fix the party. You can't fix something that's inherently corrupt or spoiled to the core. So
you can't fix the mafia from the inside out.
Well, one can try, but no. I don't want to be that sarcastic, but I do find it interesting that I've spoken to people who say, no, we could still do it. We just got to work harder. We got to hold their feet to the fire.
How do you hold their feet to the fire? I've asked that question since we started Forced to Vote.
Mhm.
What's the and I've asked every asshole who considers themselves a lefty. And they know none of them have the spine to actually say what we should do. Stop voting and donating to Democrats. None of them will say that. They're all fucked. The left is full of pussies. And that's the mechanism to holding them accountable. You stop voting for them, you stop donating to them. That's the mechanism. And then a third party would get some legs underneath them. I like what people say about voting third party. They go, oh, you can't vote for a third party because they'll lose. So what they're saying is you can't vote for a third party until a bunch of people are already voting for a third party. Well, how do you get that started? You get that started by voting for a third party. Now, third parties aren't perfect either, but they're much better than the two corporate parties, right? So the Green Party, which I have a lot of problems with, they're also infiltrated. That's the problem with the Green Party. They're super infiltrated by the CIA. And Howie Hawkins he was their last nominee, and he might as well have an office at Langley, because if that guy's not on the CIA payroll, holy shit, is he an idiot? He is an idiot, but he's certainly an infiltrator. And so look at the Green Party. The Green Party Russiagated. They Russiagated themselves. That's called infiltrated, right? The Green Party was for mandates and authoritarianism, and that's the opposite of what I thought a Green Party was supposed to be about. And all of a sudden, the Green Party's leading with LGBTQ ideas too. Like, hey, the LGBTQ from where I'm a big LGBTQ supporter. I've always been considered an ally. I never thought you should discriminate against anyone because of their sex or sexual orientation, and they shouldn't be discriminated in housing or employment or marriage or love or anything, and that you should treat everybody with the same dignity and respect that you want to be treated with. And that's how, and the LGBTQ community has become first-class citizens. When I was a young man, they used to be second-class citizens. And the way they got to be first-class citizens was engaging people and showing people that gay people were not the stereotype that their enemies wanted you to believe they were. And so by engaging with them, and they would tell you, look, a gay person is your favorite history teacher. A gay person is your mechanic. A gay person is your butcher. And they was like, oh, so that's how they... And they didn't get to be first-class citizens by calling everybody who disagreed or had a question about their agenda, by calling them a phobe or a bigot. And that's what they're doing now, because they're not fighting for equal rights because they have them. What they're fighting for is for biological males to invade female spaces, which is misogyny. And then if you stand up against that, they call you a bigot. No, you're a misogynist, you're a woman hater, and you're anti-woman, and that's that. And so that's what this, you see, I don't even like talking about it because this is what they want us talking about instead of the economic issue. And that's the big, so that's a big problem with the Green Party. That's a big problem with the Democratic. That's just that the Democratic Party uses that. I don't think the Green Party, the people in the Green Party, know that they've been infiltrated and know that they're being used in this way, but they are.
I've always found it interesting that, especially when I covered the Green Party in comparison to the Libertarians. I mean, here in Illinois, the Libertarians in the last midterm election cycle were able to get on most of the ballots, which was by far a monumental feat. I remember interviewing one of the organizers saying that, mark my words, we're going to be on every single ballot. So when you go to vote in 2022, you're going to see a Libertarian candidate there. And they succeeded 90% to getting every single seat there, or at least have the availability for a person to vote for them. As for the Illinois Green Party, it was only for water reclamation. That's the only spot they got to. And there was a point in 2010 where they were recognized as a legitimate party here in our state of Illinois. And then they dropped the ball. I've been, again, noticing just how really lackluster and mediocre and failure to change the Green Party has been. And that's been my criticism towards it. That is, they could have adapted, they could have changed. And it does call into question, I mean, again, what is the overall leadership's plan to move forward? Because there is a need for a third party. 50% of Americans identify themselves as independents. 50% of Americans want something different. And if that 50% were able to rally up or speak out or actually get their voices heard, perhaps it could potentially shake up the two-party system. I mean, ideally, what I want to see happen is third parties actually get past the 5% in a general election, maybe get double digits and be federally recognized nationwide in the United States. And maybe that's the opening that we need. But what do you think could happen next from your perspective if third parties are able to cross that threshold? Let's say the Greens hypothetically were able to get that, or the Libertarians as well. Would there be a shakeup? Do you think would that be the necessary boost that people need for there to be a potential political revolution, or is that more civic engagement in our politics? Your thoughts, Jimmy?
Well, it all depends on what Cornel West does. I think Cornel West will get over 5% of the vote, and so I'm going to ask him. He's being interviewed. I'm going to interview him September 6th on my show.
Fantastic.
He's scheduled to be on my show anyway. We'll see. And that my first question is going to be, what is the goal of your campaign? And if he says to win the presidency, I'm going to say, okay, if you that's it, that's the only goal. Like, so if you don't win the presidency, you have no secondary goal. You don't have a way to use your leverage. So this is just going to be my question. So we'll see. Mm-hmm. I think Cornel West is not compromised. I think Cornel West has integrity, mm-hmm. And that's why I'm super interested to see what he has to say, what his actual goal is. And it seems like people gave me a hard time because I didn't criticize, actually. I was giving him a pep talk. So there's a difference between a coach giving his team a pep talk and an enemy criticizing a politician. What I was doing as a coach was trying to give Cornel West a pep talk to try to get him to find the words and a message about the Ukraine war that he could deliver to the people when he's on CNN, which is a pro-war network. And so I don't know if you saw the last time he was on Meet the Press just the other day, and he did a fantastic job, and he did everything I told him to do, which is you don't let the person interrupt you. You have a message you want to get out, and you don't stop talking until you get it out. And that's exactly what he did, and he stayed on message, and he was great. I tweeted that video out. I said, this is how you push back against the establishment narrative right there. And so
exactly.
Hopefully he continues to become a better candidate, because there's a lot of room for growth in his candidacy. Well, go ahead.
So, well, again, I do find it interesting on their failed attack against him too, because he was recently interviewed by the outstanding Savvy Sab Sabrina, who's the host of RBN as well as her own YouTube channel. And when obviously corporate media they don't do their due diligence. I mean, you called them out way back in 2016 when you saw them all copying each other's articles, click, copy, paste. But they said that he owed $500,000 in back taxes, which I don't care about. And then number two, they're saying he owes child support, but his kids are freaking adults. Did anyone bother to say, hey, you got child support, but his children are freaking adults? It is so pathetic what corporate media is trying to do to smear him, and then they're all saying he should run as a Democrat. The game is rigged from the start. We're hopefully gonna have Cornel West on our show too, sometime in mid-September, hopefully soon. But I do want to ask him what comes next about building political infrastructure, and I know that's something that you're going to bring up on your show too. But we really need to lay down the point of after the general election of 2024, what happens the day after tomorrow? What happens the next day? Because I've been asking this question since 2016 and 2020, and I've gotten nothing. And it's kind of enraging me just a little bit.
Well, Cornel West has 1 million followers on Twitter. I wonder if he's going to ask them to do anything, because that's the thing about Barack Obama and Bernie Sanders. And that's the mark of a fraud. Bernie Sanders and Barack Obama are both frauds. And AOC too. AOC's got like 13 million Twitter followers, and she's never asked them one time to do anything. Same thing with Bernie Sanders.
Sunscreen. She asked her about sunscreen.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. She asked you to call Congress about sunscreen because it's super important, and maybe hair dye. So yeah, that I forget what I was saying now. They'll never. And same thing with Barack Obama. He had this huge youth movement, and as soon as he became president, he disbanded them. He didn't ask them to do anything, and they didn't do anything. And that's when Barack Obama took us from 2 wars to 7. That's when Barack Obama kicked 5.1 million families out of their houses while he made sure the bankers got their bonuses. That's when Barack Obama deported twice as many Hispanics as Donald Trump did. That's when Barack Obama dropped more bombs than George Bush. And
Jesus.
so do you see how that Barack Obama was more dangerous than Mitt Romney and John McCain? Because Democrats would have shouted if Mitt Romney and John McCain did the stuff that Barack Obama did. But because Barack Obama was doing it and he was black, they thought they were their friend, and he wasn't. Barack Obama was your enemy. He's a friend to Wall Street and a military industrial complex and big pharma, just like all of them. And so I think the wolf in sheep's clothing is much more dangerous than the wolf in wolf's clothing. And that's the thing about Donald Trump. When Donald Trump was doing something, everybody knew about it, and we could protest it, right? If he was going to start he's going to saber rattle with 2 nuclear powers, people would have said something. But because Demented Joe's doing it, and the corporate media say it's okay, people don't question it. They've really got a stranglehold on the propaganda and the narrative. And the thing about Americans, kid, and I say this all the time, is that Americans are the most propagandized people in the world, except they don't know it. That's the big difference. Like when people lived in the former Soviet Union, they knew everything they saw on the TV and the newspaper was fucking propaganda. And the same thing with people in China. They know they're being propagandized. The people who don't are the United States citizens. We are the most propagandized people in the world, and our government is less responsive to us than Russia and China. China's government's actually responsive to their people, because if something goes wrong, they don't have anybody else to blame it on. There's only one party.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I know we got a few more minutes left in, but real quick, I just want to pull this up here for everyone. If you are in the great city of New York, in Manhattan, everyone check this out. Jimmy Dore, August 25th. He's going to be there at the Gramercy Theater. I hope I said that. Look, that's sold out. Again, August 25th, 7 p.m. Whoa, you're doing 2 double back-to-back shows? Holy cow. See, I missed that. When you did that, when you were at Talia Hall in Chicago, you did those 2 back-to-back shows. I mean, honestly, for those who have had the chance to see the Jimmy Dore show in Chicago back then, awesome stuff, man. Congratulations on that. And there's a couple more. August 26th, you're going to be in Pennsylvania, Pottstown, and a few other places too, man. So, Jimmy, is there anything you want to tell people so they could find out about these events?
I want to tell people that I'll be in St. Louis. I'll be in San Diego. I'm coming to a city near you. I'll be in Toronto. Toronto's already sold out. So, yeah, we'll be in a lot of places. So it's always great. it's quite a happening what happens at my shows, and I know this sounds like I'm patting myself on the back, but it's exactly what I always dreamed of having when I went to see George Carlin for the first time, and I noticed that his audience was everybody. There were teenagers there, there were senior citizens there were hippies, literal hippies there, and there were guys in business suits. You know, there were black, white, there were nuns. I saw nuns there. I saw there were all kinds. So he had such a broad left, right, center, in between, old, young, and that is what I'm seeing at my shows too. And so I'm very happy to report that what happens at my shows is the left and the right comes together and realize that we aren't each other's enemy, and that we actually share a common enemy, and that enemy is the oligarchy, and that we're not going to blame each other for the pain inflicted on us economically by that oligarchy. We're going to blame the oligarchy, and we're going to stand together, just like Christian Smalls did on Staten Island when he organized the Amazon Union. He did that with a bunch of white working class Trump voters. And that's what we have to get back to, is recognizing that we are not each other's enemy, that the enemy is the oligarchy, and they want to keep us divided by keeping us talking about trans issues. They want, and white supremacy, and masks and vaccines. These are all distractions from the economic war that's being waged on the working class. And I'm not going to let them distract us from it. I will tell the truth. As an ally of the LGBTQ community, I will tell the truth about when the LGBTQ issue is being used to control people instead of liberate people. And that's what's being done right now.
That's a fantastic note to end it. Again, check out Jimmy Dore, jimmydore.com. He's from Chicago, very own. Hopefully you get to come back to the city again very soon. Again, this tour, COVID Lies are funny, and they are funny. We're going to be continuing on with the rest of our main show. Jimmy, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us in the morning. We do appreciate it. And as always, keep speaking truth to power, and never back down, because you're one of the reasons why we created this show. I speak on behalf of Daniel, FaZe, and the rest of my crew here at Hard Lens Media. Thank you a lot for, again, being the voice for a lot of us and calling out these jagoff politicians for the scumbags that they are.
I appreciate you, kid. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'll see you soon.
All right, no problem. Folks, we're going to take a quick little break, and then we are going to be starting with our main show. Peace.
Land of the free, and you'll know us by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. Ah, how sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead. Where the thin blue line meets razor's edge. And where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stops each finger and watches you fall to your death. And drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections, step by step till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen. Being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus. and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs. All laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer. That 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer. Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones line each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled, bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. Fed by the fed to the grinder. Now the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsad, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, and it dines on the dead. Now the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. And the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn the line with the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dies on the dead. Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn the line with the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, that it bleeds you dry, that it dies on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led.